Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to welcome you all to the 98th Societas Koreana lecture meeting. My name is Claire Kim and I'm MC for today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Minjee Kim, who is going to give us an insightful lecture titled Hanbok in a larger historical context. Before we begin, also I would like to briefly introduce Dr. Minjee Kim. She received her doctoral degree from Seoul National University in 2000 and currently is a research associate at Tracing Patterns Foundation based in Berkeley, California in the US. Her specialty is in the history of dress, fashion, and textiles of Korea, and its transnational connections. For the past decade, she worked with many renowned institutions across Europe, America, and Korea. Without further delay, please welcome Dr. Minjee Kim with a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I also want to express my thanks to Kang Young-mi 선생님 for all her logistics support, and thank you all for coming. I'm so encouraged by your attendance and incredibly honored to speak to such distinguished opinion leaders. So when I was asked to deliver a talk on Hanbok, I thought today's audience might be interested in the relationship between dress and fashion and international relations in the context of Korean history. So I made the title, Hanbok in a larger historical context. What I mean by the larger historical context is to look at Hanbok within a wider scope of global culture that grants to find some commonalities and differences in a comparative perspective, and a long history of Korea within which we may be able to find a sort of historical pattern. So with that wider and longer angle, my goal of today's talk is to address a need of complex and multifaceted understanding of Hanbok. Historically, dress and fashion has been always a cultural product of complex geopolitics and geoeconomics tuned with international relations. And over time, Korean identity has been articulated through the materiality and cultural practice of dress. In this talk, I will use the term dress a lot. So just to be in the same page, I'm going to review the definition of the term dress in academic discipline. Most of dress scholars use the definition by Joanne B. Eicher. She defined dress as an inclusive term that encompasses body modifications and body supplements. Body modifications can include anything that can alter the condition of body. So tattoo, scarification, plastic surgery nowadays, and body painting, makeup that can change the color of your skin, right? And perfume that alters the smell of the body, right? So those can be included in the body modifications, and body supplements can include all the articles of clothing that covers the body from top to bottom. So from head to toe, whatever you wear can be considered as an items of clothing. So hats, watch, glasses, belts, socks and shoes, gloves, those can be considered as an items of clothing. And also, if you carry a bag, that can be body supplements. So bags, and in the ancient times, people carried long sword and bow case and arrow box, those stuffs all can be considered as body supplements. So together, body modifications and body supplements communicated with the community members without having to speak who you are. So the items of dress display your identity without having to speak who you are. So really, the term dress covers, as a serious subject of academic research, covers a wide range of materials and their related cultural practices. And as a cultural practice, I know this is kind of obscene, but as a cultural practice, the dress practice is exclusively to human society. No other living creatures wear dress in their nature. Humans can dress dogs and cats, but dogs and cats do not wear in their nature. So dress is exclusively to human society, and as a human behavior, dress is universal. There are no societies wherein individuals do not engage in dress. Human body has been always adorned with any form of decoration. Throughout this long and globally common practice, humans intriguingly employed dress as a means to display their belonging. And that dress has evolved in a distinctive way across cultures. So this is Indian sari, Japanese kimono, Chinese qipao, Vietnamese aozai, Korean hanbok, and guess what? This is Kyrgyzstan dress. I took this photo in 2018 at my trip to Kyrgyzstan at Eagle Hunting Festival. In and outside of Korea, Hanbok serves to represent Korean ethnicity and South Korean nationality. North Koreans call it 조선옷. Hanbok and 조선옷 meant the same when the term hanbok was coined. However, the disparate directions the two countries have taken for nearly 80 years since the division of Korea in 1945, that had led to divergences in the trajectories of 조선옷 and hanbok in terms of the meaning, style, and ways in which the tradition has been reappropriated in the modern fashion system. One of the intrinsic functions of ethnic dress is to mark one's ethnicity, which means to differentiate us versus others, us from others. Although people who lived in Korea had a notion of distinctive tribal dress for nearly more than 2 millennia, however, they did not call their clothing hanbok until the turn of the 20th century. So the term hanbok was coined at the threshold of the opening of Korea to the world, followed by the colonization. In order to differentiate Korean clothing from that of Chinese clothing, hwabok, and Western clothing, yangbok. And thereafter, usage of the term hanbok significantly increased under the free market economy and along the processes of constructing national identity to build a modern nation state in South Korea from the mid-20th century after Korean War. As opposed to yangbok, we tend to regard hanbok with long, linear traditionality and pure Korean ethnic authenticity. Many Korean dictionaries describe hanbok in this way as well. So this is the dictionary definition of hanbok, described in the Standard Korean Language Dictionary published by the National Institute of Korean Language. This definition describes hanbok as our country's authentic clothing, especially refers to the clothing of Joseon. The adjective authentic conceals so much more complex story. And this definition makes hanbok associated with Joseon Dynasty style without a doubt, which I find very misleading because the 500 years of Joseon Dynasty dress fashion underwent dynamic changes. So dress of Joseon dynasty cannot be lumped together in a single stereotype. I will elaborate more on this in the later part of my talk and disprove the traditionality and ethnic authenticity. Okay. Now we are going to embark on a long journey. If you are new to the Korean history, please check with the provided dynastic order and timeline, which starts from Old Joseon, Han commanderies, and tribal confederations, the Three Kingdoms, and northern southern states period with unified Silla Kingdom and Balhae, and Goryeo, Joseon, Korean Empire, Japanese colonial period, liberation, trusteeship under the Soviet Union and United States of America, and each region finally established North Korea and South Korea separate as a separate government. So with that, now we are gonna see how has the role of dress as a signifier of collective identity been initiated in Korea. As the outset, we will review the record of women in a top-knot and barbarian clothing. The first Chinese official history called Shiji informs that when women escaped from Yan, so women is a person's name who lived in Yan Dynasty, China, and the historical record Shiji described that when women escaped from Yan with over 1,000 people seeking political asylum to the east, he wore a top-knot and barbarian clothing. He gradually integrated people of Jinbon and Joseon with refugees from Yan and Qi, China, and eventually he became the king of Joseon. This Joseon is not the recent era Joseon, this is old Joseon. This is the written record on the earliest dress of Korea. It is about 194 BCE. It is beginning of the 2nd century BCE, and this record sets the dress style of the new king of Old Joseon as barbarous. There's no visual evidence of women's appearance. We can only make scholarly conjecture with currently available sources. So for top-knot style with Goguryeo mural, with the depiction on the Goguryeo mural tomb, and barbarians' clothing with Scythians' outfit, who lived across Eurasia about 7th to 3rd century BC, a little bit earlier time than women lived, the time women lived. However, that's the best conjecture we can go. What is notable of this record is this record sets the onset of the dress style of Korea apart from China. Then, what does it mean to be barbarous clothing vis-a-vis civilized clothing? Behind this dichotomous idea, there was a worldview based on sinocentrism. Sinocentrism is a kind of ethnocentrism that posits Han people at the center of the universe, and the rest of the people who lived in the periphery were regarded as barbarians. And sinocentrism gets consolidated with incorporation of Confucianism during the Han Dynasty, China, so about 1 to 2 century CE. And it was considered that the status of barbarous could be converted to civilized through Sinicization. That means if you adapt to the way of Han Chinese way, then you can achieve the civilized status. So this worldview, I find this worldview had a tremendous impact on dress culture throughout the entire pre-modern times of Korea. We will see more of that notion in the later talk. And in 108 BCE, Han Dynasty China defeated Old Joseon and established Han commanderies, Xuantu, Lintun, Lelang, Zhenfan. So those are Han commanderies. In Korean, it is called Hyendo, Imdun, Nangnang, Jinbon. And at the same time, in the Korean peninsula and its northern part of the territory, there were tribal confederations such as Buyo, Goguryeo, Okjo, Dongye, Mahan, Jinhan, Byeonhan, those three Hans, Samhan. And another Chinese official history called Sanguozhi, 삼국지 위지동이전, that was published in the late 3rd century by Chen Shou. And this official history left detailed description of those tribal confederations' dress practice. It says East Okjo and Goguryeo, these two groups' dress styles are similar, but Buyo and Goguryeo, these two groups' dress style are different, although Buyo and Goguryeo shared language. And Ye and Goguryeo, these two groups' dress style were different, although Ye and Goguryeo shared kinship bloodline. And three Hans, these three Hans' dress style were different from Buyo and different from Goguryeo. However, within the Samhan, three Hans, Mahan, Jinhan, Byeonhan, those groups were, their dress culture were pretty similar. So this description, I find this description is really, really important because this description illuminates dress was an intrinsic means to embody the notion of us versus others, right? But not one-to-one correlation with the tribal groups, okay? Not one-to-one correlation with the tribal groups. So I argue that dress developed as a cultural indicator rather than a racial marker. This message can be better grasped with this mausuit fashion. So, South Korea and North Korea share ethnicity, but South Koreans do not wear mausuit. However, China and North Korea do not share ethnicity, but they wear the same mausuit. So in that really early period of record, it gives us really important message, right? So dress developed as a cultural marker rather than racial indicator. I find this is really important. So, and later, these tribal groups gradually transformed into the three centralized kingdoms, the three kingdoms of Goguryeo, Baekje, Silla, during the 4th and 6th century. This period is dubbed state formation period. During the state formation period, Korea was relatively isolated, away from the political conflicts that occurred in China. So each state developed to a centralized kingdom with strong governing power and system. In that state formation processes, dress played a significant role in articulating social strata and divisions by legislation of state dress code. I labeled this period as fashioning the barbarous style, 이속. In these Goguryeo mural paintings, you will find a figure with his official title. This is his official title, and you can find these figures of lower class are depicted smaller than the higher class people. So that evinces the society's class stratification. And what you see now is the Shilla's court uniform regulation, promulgated by King Bopheung in 520 CE. The elements such as color of the court robe, material of handheld tablet, and material of collar and headdress all communicated with the wearer's rank, which is divided into 17 ranks. Of particular note is the commentary from the Korean historical records such as 삼국사기 and 고려사 on this dress rank regulation system. The 삼국사기 and 고려사 commented on this dress and rank regulation as rather barbarous. 이속. Dress of Korea began as barbarous practice, and up to this point, it was received as barbarous. But this notion was only a label. Even before this period, what is barbarous or what is civilized, so those kind of elements were intermingled because, the Han Chinese people and barbarians always had a conflict by war and cultural exchange. So all the barbarous elements and Han Chinese elements were intermingled. However, this was in the people's notion. This was regarded as barbarous. And the three kingdoms, while competing each other for building own state, the dress style among the three kingdoms became similar. These two are different versions of 백제 ambassador, and this is 고구려 ambassador, this is Shilla ambassador. As you see, their dress, their entire, the composition of ensemble looks so similar. They have upper garment, which is long enough to cover the hip, and pretty much generously cut pants, and both upper garments and pants have the trimming with colored fabric, right? Border trimming of with the colored fabric. Although their headdress looks slightly different and the fabric designs were different. So these Chinese historical records listed here all left a description. Their dress culture were among the three kingdoms. The three kingdoms' dress culture were pretty much similar. And then we are going to go with the Great Transition. So we tend to think the westernization of Korean's daily clothing is the first time statewide fashion change. So Hanbok has long history, unbroken evolution of long history, but that is not true. Before the westernization of Korean's daily clothing, there were several times statewide big fashion change. So this is the first big fashion change that occurred in the mid-7th century. The Great Transition was made with changes to Tang Dynasty style. In the mid-7th century, Shilla unified the three kingdoms. The Unification War was an international war. A major fashion change was made in the course of the Unification War, pre-war time and interwar time. In 648, Shilla leader Kim Chun-chu went to the Tang court. So this is Shilla, and Shilla leader Kim Chun-chu went to the Tang court to forge military alliance. There, he asked for Tang Emperor Taizong's permission to adopt Tang Dynasty's court uniform system, and he got the permission. After Chun-chu came back to Shilla, Silla government reformed their court uniform system in the following year in 649. And 11 years later, in 660 CE, Tang and Silla allies conquered Baekje. So the court uniform reform occurred before the war, okay? And then 4 years later, now Silla annexed Baekje. So Silla is not the old Silla. Silla became greater. The king Munmu of the greater Silla had ordered that women in the country should dress in the Tang-style attires as well. So women's dress was changed into Tang Dynasty style between the war. So after Silla conquered Baekje, women's dress code was changed. And then 4 years later, Tang and Silla allies conquered Goguryeo in 668. I want you to note that the change of men's dress proceeded prior to that of women's dress by 15 years. And also, that state dress code change was voluntary. Voluntarily, Kim Chun-chu wanted to reform their dress code, and then they implemented the dress code reform in Silla. This is the visual evidence that shows this is the unified Silla's civil official, and this is the Tang Dynasty's civil official. As you see, the robe, court robe, is similar style, and the handheld tablets, this is kind of notepad nowadays, and even their headdress and the way they groom their beard looks similar. And this is the depiction of Chamberlain on Balhae's mural tomb. And Balhae also followed the Tang Dynasty's dress code. So their court uniform changed, adopting the Tang Dynasty style. And probably this is the most frequently seen outfit in the whole Korean historical dramas. And today, even grooms at their wedding, they wear this style of court uniform. But this court uniform fashion began actually in the unified Silla dynasty and Balhae dynasty. And this is the, I already explained about the Silla's female outfit that adopted Tang fashion. And this shows Balhae dynasty's figurines, and it shows pretty much similar style. The upper garment was tucked in the skirt, and the skirt was tied at the very high-waisted line. And I also want to note that Tang Dynasty fashion is not purely Han Chinese invented, what Han Chinese people invented. With active diplomatic activities and trade via Silk Roads, numerous diverse barbaric elements from West and Central Asia were fused into Tang fashion. So at the time, Tang fashion was known as cosmopolitan, like melting pot, very diverse fashion. And that Tang Dynasty fashion, that thriving fashion transmitted to the East, to unified Silla and Balhae, and also to Japan, Nara period and early Heian period. So dress was a political instrument to solidify monarchical power and maintain its stability through dress and rank regulation. And also, dress was a diplomatic tool to manage international relations. The leader of Silla recognized the international currents of fashion change at that time and prepared the new dress code for the new unified regime, which was done proactively and voluntarily. And the next great transition was made during the Goryeo dynasty, when Goryeo received the Mongols' political intervention as a vassal state and compulsory ally tied with royal marriages. When Goryeo King Chungnyeol was a crown prince, he was destined to stay at the court of Yuan dynasty from 1271 to 1272. When he returned to Goryeo, he voluntarily changed his hair and outfit to the Mongolian way, with braided hairstyle, 변발, and barbarous-style clothing, Hanbok. That provoked collective responses of deep lamentation and outcry from Goryeo people who saw the changes of his appearance. But that incident became pivotal to the statewide change of dress in Goryeo. 6 years later, in 1278, he ordered people to dress in the Yuan dynasty style, Mongolian style. From then on, every man shaved and braided their hair in Mongolian style, and that Mongol style prevailed in Goryeo dynasty for over a century, from about 1278 to 1388. The following is a dialogue between Kubilai Khan and Goryeo interpreter Kang Su-hyung in 1278. Kubilai asked, "What's the dress code in Goryeo?" Kang answered, "Goryeo people wear headwear and garments in the Mongolian style every day. However, they change to Goryeo style clothes, Goryeo-bok, when they receive and read the Goryeo king's letter of order or celebrate Goryeo's holidays." Kubilai Khan poured out about the criticism on him. "People say that I banned Goryeo people from wearing Goryeo's dress, but how did I do that? How did I abolish your country's dress custom so quickly?" Unquote. So this dialogue alludes to Goryeo's voluntary decision to convert to Mongol's style dress. Also, the term Goryeo-bok, Goryeo style clothes, drew my particular attention. The dual structure of Mongol clothes and Goryeo-bok is comparable to today's Yangbok and Hanbok in terms of daily wear versus dress for special occasion as persisting tradition. Some surviving visual and material evidences show that Goryeo people conformed to the prevailing Mongol dress code. So these can be identified as Mongolian style robe and hats. And usually Mongolian style robe was closed at the wearer's right sideline. It shows deep closure. So when you see the closure, it is closed at the wearer's right side and right side, right? So this kind of Mongol style dominated Goryeo dynasty for a century. And then Mongol fashion in Goryeo began to wane as Mongol collapsed in 1368 by Zhu Yuanzhang, the first emperor of Ming. The third great transition was made to adopt Ming dynasty style. But this didn't happen with the beginning of Joseon dynasty. It happened in the late Goryeo dynasty in the reign of King Gongmin. As the Yuan's power waned, King Gongmin, this is the portrait of King Gongmin. King Gongmin, as soon as he became the king, he abandoned Mongol-style dress practice as an attempt to eradicate Yuan's impact on culture of Goryeo. Then what did he wear? He returned to the old dress code of Goryeo before the influence of Mongol. So he returned to the old dress code of Goryeo, which modeled Tang Song style. And then in 1370, he received Ming Emperor Taizu's bestowal of ritual costumes and daily working uniforms for himself, Queen and Goryeo officials. In light of Chinese imperial court uniform regulation that bestowed items of dress were degraded by 2 ranks than Chinese imperial system. This bestowal stipulated not only the dress code of Goryeo from this point, but also the status of Goryeo as Ming's vassal state. Again, note the crucial role of dress in articulating international order. So what King Gongmin was received was 2 levels lower than Chinese imperial system to demarcate Goryeo as a vassal state of Ming. And that symbolic bestowal of dress was accompanied in laying the basis of the international order in the relationship between Ming and Goryeo and later Ming and Joseon. King Gongmin's policy was coherent in trying to convert Goryeo's state dress code in line with the newly emerging international power structure with the rise of Ming. But the conversion in reality was by no means straightforward, going through the reign of his son, King Wang. In 1387, King Wu prescribed the new court uniform code complying with the Ming dynasty's system, but he himself and his close courtiers wore Mongol style still. He wore Mongol style dress, but he implemented the court uniform reform of court uniform system, adopting Ming dynasty system. And then a year later, on May 27th, 1388, King Wu halted the use of Ming Taizu's regnal era name Hongmu, and his people had his people wear Mongol dress. On July 7, 6 weeks later, on July 7th, he restored the use of Hongwu and dressed in the Ming dynasty style outfit and prohibited Mongol dress practice. So from then on, finally, his policy continued to be maintained throughout the entire period of the entire rest period of Goryeo, and that was succeeded in Joseon. The style dissemination of the Ming court uniform is evident in the juxtaposed portraits. So this is Ming dynasty's first emperor, Ming Taizu, and this is Joseon king, the first Joseon king, Taejo Iseongye. As you see, the dragon robe style is very similar, only the color of the dragon robe is different because yellow is reserved for imperial system, and the color blue is for the East barbarian. So the Sinocentrism also designated the 5 directional color system, which is center is yellow and blue is for east, black is for north, and white is for the west, and red is for the south. So this color system is also derived from Han Chinese Sinocentrism. In this great transition of fashion, adopting Ming dynasty style, men's fashion changed first, and then the change of women's fashion lagged behind. As you see here, the record of King Taejong's address. So King Taejong, the 3rd king of Joseon, addressed, quote, "Our dress code conforms to the Chinese practice modeled Ming dynasty, but only our women's dress still keeps the old fashion. Can't we really make them convert?" Unquote. And this reminds us of the 15 years disparity in implementing men's dress change and women's dress change in Shilla, right? And this pattern reoccurred when their clothing was westernized in early 20th century. So this is one of the royal family member, Lee Jun-yong, Joseon's royal family member, and his dress was changed into European fashion, but his wife's dress still shows traditional style. And also, a young generation changed their clothes first, and old generation, especially female old generation fashion, changed the latest. During the Joseon dynasty, there was a dynastic change in China from Han-ruled Ming dynasty to Joseon or Manchu-ruled Qing dynasty. What is notable here is that even though Joseon became a de facto vassal state after Byungja-horan, the invasion by Qing dynasty after Qing defeated Ming dynasty, Qing also invaded Joseon. And after that, Joseon became a de facto vassal state with Qing dynasty. However, their dress code, Joseon's dress code, did not change to follow Qing dynasty style. They still insisted Ming dynasty style because Joseon elites disparaged Qing dynasty people, Manchu, as barbarian. They instead claimed that now Joseon is the orthodox cultural center after the collapse of Ming. This is usually called as Joseon 중화주의, Joseon Sinocentrism, or 소중화주의, Little Sinocentrism. And this notion was coupled with closed-door policy until the late 19th century. And this period saw the indigenous development in fashion. This is really important. I find this is really important. This period was kind of closed. Joseon was closed, and they insisted now they are the center of the culture. So during this time, the fashion, Joseon fashion saw some indigenous development toward the archetypal hanbok. I would label this period as a period of fashioning Joseonness. In late Joseon, as you see this King Yeongjo's portrait and King Gojong's portrait, their dragon robes are following the Ming Taiju, Ming dynasty style, not Qing dynasty style, right? And this shows the stylistic progression from the early Joseon toward the archetypal of female hanbok. So hanbok in the 20th century and 21st centuries, I like this, but the archetypal hanbok style with short and tight upper garment and voluminous skirt were fashioned during this time. And men's fashion also underwent changes more prominently after the 17th century onwards, fashioning the unique late Joseon men's style with numerous different styles of coats and robes. The style of 18th and 19th century are most frequently featured in the Korean historical dramas. The 18th and 19th late Joseon period saw some indigenous fashioning of dress fashion, but bear in mind, Joseon people did not call their clothing style hanbok yet at this point. The fourth great transition, adoption of Western style, modernization, and globalization that was started from 1894 to the present. Spread of Western imperialism and colonialism was a global phenomenon that hit hard on East Asia as well. Meiji Japan annexed the Korean Empire and transplanted modern governing system through colonial rule. In this process, Koreans' new dress code was not that of Japan, but of European, which Japanese elites had voluntarily changed into through their Meiji reform. Going through modernization and globalization of fashion system in the 20th and 21st century, the legacy of Sino-barbaric dichotomy gradually vanished in Korea. However, at the beginning of this great transition, the notion of us versus barbarians continued and translated to a new dual structure, which is our dress Hanbok versus Western dress Yangbok. At this point, the term Hanbok was newly coined and conceptualized for the category of traditional dress. As we saw the term Goryobok within the dual structure of Mongolian dress style and Goryobok style, now this has a dual structure of Yangbok and Hanbok. However, the materiality and the composition of items of Hanbok already underwent significant hybridization with foreign components at the sartorial interface of East and West. As an example, let me tell you how paradoxical we perceive Hanbok as traditional and authentic Korean. Men's Hanbok composition. This is 20th century men's Hanbok composition. As you see, 바지, 저고리, 조끼, and 마고자. But 조끼 and 마고자 did not exist during the Joseon dynasty. 조끼 and 마고자 were incorporated into men's Hanbok ensemble at the turn of the 20th century as a foreign component. 조끼 came from Western suit, as you all know, and 마고자 came from Qing dynasty Magua. And that Qing dynasty's Magua transformed into Magoja, adapting to Koreans' aesthetic taste. So these two are foreign origin items. However, these two were incorporated into Hanbok ensemble, and we still perceive Hanbok is very traditional and authentic Korean. So that's kind of, I find it very paradoxical. Koreans never used pockets in their clothing construction. Instead, they used pouches suspended at their waistband. And when the Western suit was introduced to Korea, Joseon men loved carrying tobacco and other necessities in these pockets. So they call these pockets 호주머니, literally meaning barbarian's pouch. So here again, we find the Korean commoners' view of the world ingrained in the binary notions of us versus barbarian again. Perhaps this is the last legacy of Sino-barbaric dichotomy, and it vanished thereafter. As I said, Magoja is from Qing dynasty's Magua, and this transformed into Magoja, adapting to Koreans' aesthetic taste. And even female Hanbok. Joseon dynasty's skirt style is like this, rectangular shape of a wrapping skirt. However, it was American missionary teacher who taught physical education in Ihwa Hakdang. She witnessed her students' chest constrained with very tightly tied skirt. So she taught her student to attach shoulder straps so it can hang from shoulders and that liberate body constraint, right? So I find this is really important invention that made Hanbok fashion forward, because in the early 20th century, around 1920s, also in Western fashion, people did not wear corset. So corset was removed. As corset was removed from women's fashion, women's body became liberated. So this, in Korea, almost a similar time, with the attachment of shoulder straps, Koreans' female body was liberated from the constraint. So all these kind of foreign elements were incorporated into hanbok construction until now. So at the beginning of the westernization of Korean's daily clothing, hanbok and yangbok were disparate binary fashion categories. However, over a century's cross-pollination, they created this kind of look called modern hanbok, fashion hanbok, shin hanbok, new style hanbok, or 생활 hanbok. Those, whatever it is called, those are mixed with hanbok and yangbok. So now hanbok and yangbok is not disparate. It just intermingles together. So the category of lifestyle hanbok and fashion hanbok, fusion hanbok, this interstitiality, if you see this kind of fashion style, this style is neither hanbok nor yangbok. They lie in between. So this interstitiality tells us really, it makes really hard to define what is hanbok now. So as these disrupted the sartorial boundary, porous and blurred, traditional hanbok makers, hanbok designers, redefine themselves as traditional hanbok designer. So in the past, hanbok was traditional in and of itself. Hanbok did not need any extra adjective, traditional hanbok. But now hanbok designers who make formal style hanbok, they introduce themselves, I'm a traditional hanbok designer. So that made hanbok redefined as traditional hanbok. So with this new perspectives, so this is the key takeaways, but I'm not gonna read it because of the time is up. So I wrap up this talk hoping the many new perspectives raised in this talk could help resolving the transnationally controversial understanding of the originality of hanbok, which is entwined with the particular nationalisms in East Asia. And today's talk is based on my 2 previous publications and 1 in forthcoming. And if you want to learn more about dress history of Korea, you can also check my website. You can find where you can find more lecture videos there. So this is it, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you for your information. And as of today, all of the Societas Koreana lectures in 2023 have ended. On behalf of the Academy of Korean Studies, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to all the participants for today and before. I really wish to meet you next year's Societas Koreana lecture gathering again, and kindly ask your continuous support and interest for next year. All right, this is the end of today's meeting. Now let us open the banquet for your dining pleasure. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. This has been Claire Kim. Thank you very much.